Hey, it's Dave.
And Dan.
All right, and welcome to another episode of Hook on Headwaters. And this is the Beyond Headwaters segment. And today we're going to be talking about fluke and fluke fishing. It is a great way for freshwater and saltwater fishing. So I'm going to turn it over to Dan in just a second. I first want to apologize for the wind. We have a windy day here in East Central Florida. So I apologize, but we'll try to keep the wind down to a minimum, if that's possible.
We'll try. Okay, so coming into the time of year where I really like throwing flukes. I have multiple ways that I like to fish it. Most of it has to do with a single hook rig. Okay, so this particular one, what I fish about 90% of the time is just a weightless hook. I fish a 3/0 extra wide gap Gamakatsu with a 20-pound fluorocarbon tied line to line with my 20-pound Cortland braid. So one of the places this really shines for me is it's like target specific. So especially coming into the spawn, Dave, I start thinking, okay,
Right.
hydrilla. I fish this a lot around areas that I have holes in the hydrilla, where you can visually see a hole in the hydrilla. I'll make a cast to the hole, and I dead stick this. And what I mean by dead sticking is when I cast it, I basically cast it where I want to fish, and I let it sink all the way to the bottom, and I don't do anything. I let it sink all the way down, and when it's finally on the bottom, I let it sit. You're going to get about 80% of your bites on the initial fall or after it's hit the bottom. Many times I've found that I go to pick up my slack, and for some reason I didn't feel the fish he was already on. So I do a lot of line watching with this, and I keep contact with my bait at all times if possible. And we'll get into the casting and wind here in a few minutes, and we'll go over some of that and what I do. So this is my main go-to thing on a day that's not super windy, or if I'm fishing protected areas. Also, another place that I failed to mention, around clumps of cattails, where I know there's going to be spawning fish, because we're, in a couple months we're going to be deep into the spawn. So I'll fish a fluke a lot in these areas up where I know the fish are going to be spawning. Again, holes in hydrilla, spawning areas, and like clumps of cattails where it's clean water all the way to the cattails, as in not a bunch of hydrilla matted up in there with it. That's where I throw that. Now I have some other hooks that I really like around the spawn. So some options that you have out there. This is a hook that's made by Mustad. I do not know if they still produce this hook or not. It's a small, just a straight shank hook, but it's got about a 32nd ounce weight. You press into the front of the bait. Yep. Let me unrig this one. I'll rig this one. So this one, you press it into the head of the bait. It's got two little hooks on there. You should be able to see that on. It's got two little hooks there. You press the entire thing into the head of the bait, all the way up to the eye of the hook. Okay, this is what we have so far. Then we rig, there's a little split in the bottom of the fluke. Rig it weedless, fish it the same. Now this one with a little bit of weight, with just the 3/0 now, it falls and kind of glides around a lot. With a weight on the nose, it tends to be more of a nose down, spiraling presentation as it sinks, okay? So, some other hooks that we have. A lot of options on it. This is a hook that a lot of guys probably use. You guys should be able to see there's a weight on the shank of the hook. Now, with the last hook I showed you, the weight was at the eye. This weight is down the shank. You rig it the same way you do your regular 3/0 extra wide gap. So I'll just go ahead and rig it. So you see.
Yeah, Gamakatsu makes these.
Everybody makes them. I've ripped the head of this bait because I've used it.
And some of them will have the screw,
so you can
screw and lock in the head of the bait.
You can see there that the weight is a little further aft of the bait.
Yeah.
So it has a more of a horizontal presentation as it falls and spirals. Now, one of my favorites for during the spawn, for fishing those holes I was talking about, when I'm really target specific and I know there's a bed in those holes. Okay, so here's another hook that I have. Again, this one's an old design by Mustad. It's got the press-in weight, about a 32nd ounce weight on the nose, and there's one on the shank of the hook. Okay, so what I like about this, it gives me an almost vertical presentation with a bait that sits horizontally. So I'll rig this up right quick. Push this into the nose of the bait. All the way to the eye of the hook. So we have so far. And I rig it weedless. Now when you look at this, you'll see we have a weight. Buddy Jimmy and I call it a belly weight.
Yep.
So this bait, what's interesting about this, Dave, is when you cast it, of course you got a lot of weight, you cast a mile, cast it in the wind. Now this bait, guys, when it sinks, it gives you this kind of an action. It wobbles, and it'll have a little bit, sometimes it'll have a little bit of a spiraling downward, or sometimes, depending on if you keep tension on the line or you let it fall on a complete slack line, sometimes it'll fall just straight down and wiggle all the way to the bottom. It can be deadly on fish on a bed. That's one of my favorites for specific things like fishing those holes in the hydrilla. I like that a lot. It's easy to pitch because you got more weight. So it's one of my favorites.
Maybe on a windy day.
Yeah, it gives you some distance, but you got to remember that it's going to give you a different action. Right. Still my favorite, if it's not too windy, it's just a regular 3/0 extra wide Gamakatsu with no weight.
Right.
You can rig it with a bullet weight. In years past, I've used the old Gambler screw-in weight. It's a weight that has a screw in. I don't even know if they make those anymore. I got a lot of old tackle, guys, but it's good stuff. So I just won't throw it away. I'll rig it with that, and it gives me more of a nose down presentation. Yeah. So again, let's kind of recap the rigging. It's the 3/0 extra wide gap or whatever hook you choose. At least 3 feet of fluorocarbon. I usually make about a 5 foot long piece. Tie a line to 9 knot with a double uni. And I like 20-pound fluorocarbon. Okay, so now color selection. I have about 4 colors I really like for my bass fishing. My number 1 color when I've got clean water is straight watermelon. That's my favorite. My second favorite would be the watermelon gold. So you guys get a good look at it. It's just watermelon with gold flake in it. See that kind of flash in there? You know, in some mornings when it's early and still kind of not necessarily overcast, a little less light, I'll throw a watermelon red.
My favorite.
Yeah, it's probably my 3rd favorite maybe. Again, I don't have any watermelon to show you. And then my secret one that I really like is a June bug fluke.
June bug is the Florida color.
Yeah, it's the Florida color, but you know what's interesting, Dave, is that I've had it on a couple occasions where color made a big difference between the watermelon fluke and the June bug fluke. And the June bug, you know, usually the watermelon does just fine. I had a couple situations. One, my wife and I won a tournament on Lake Estapoga on June bug flukes and horny toads, the Zoom horny toad. And then I had the same thing happen at Stick Marsh, where I was throwing watermelon and watermelon gold and watermelon red. And we were picking a fish here and there, but we picked up the June bug and really started smashing it. So that's kind of my go-to thing. When the other colors don't seem to be working right, if there's a little color in the water, I'll go to a June bug, and I really like that.
And I'll put a link. I'll put a link in the comments area for all the different hooks, so we can find some of those, the other one and the flukes themselves. Okay.
And you want to go do some casting?
We're going to do some casting now.
Kind of show you.
Yeah.
Show you guys how I fish it, and maybe you can comment and let us know how you like to fish it. Typically, I don't fish them fast. I know a lot of guys fish them super fast, and I'll do that sometimes. I feel like the fish are kind of schooling up and feeding. But for techniques that I like, this is what I'm going to show you guys here in just a second.
Okay, we'll be right back. We're off to the pond behind us.
All right, guys, so as we were talking about how I like fishing this fluke, is what I call dead sticking. It's basically a very, very relaxed and simple technique, and it works really, really well. So I pick my target where I want to fish. Now you can't fish in open water as well, but if there's a cattail or, you know, brush or some kind of a hole where you want to cast. I'll make my cast. And I let it sink. And I let it keep sinking. Now notice I got my finger on my line. I'm watching, visually looking at my line, because a lot of times you won't feel the fish bite, but you'll see the line jump. Okay? So the bait has just now hit the bottom. So now what I'll do is I pick up a little bit of line and I move it with just my rod tip. And I pick up my slack and I wait again. A lot of times I'm just one-handed fishing when I'm fishing a fluke. What I find is people get in too much of a hurry trying to fish this technique. It's very similar to fishing a Cinco, but this bait's a lot lighter than a Cinco. So again, now I'm going to move it again. I lift. I'm still watching my line the whole time. I pick up my slack. So I'm watching visually and feeling for a bite. And I'll fish it all the way until I'm ready to make another cast. I'll fish it all the way under the boat. Now, for a windy day like we have today, we're kind of protected from the wind, but I want to show you a technique that we've covered in a later past video of how I like to fish this, especially a light bait in the wind. Let's make another cast. Now watch what I do with my rod tip. That's the most important part. There are some mistakes that I see regularly with making a cast. So now I got a breeze here. I cast right before my bait hits the water. Look where my rod tip is. It is almost at the surface of the water. What this does, it sticks the line to the water, and it doesn't allow a big wind loop to get in to your line. Because if you cast and hold a high rod tip like I am now, you get a big belly in your line, like what's happening now. And it's actually moving my bait when I don't want it to move. So it's like using my line as a sail. So when I make my cast on a windy day to keep my bait in the location where I want it, I'll cast. Right as my bait hits the water, my rod tip goes down. It gives me a straight point from the rod tip to my bait. No big loop in my line. And then I start the process of waiting and fishing slowly. That's my favorite way of fishing a fluke. Comment below, let us know your favorite way to fish a fluke.
All right, now we're back. Thanks, Dan. Hope everyone picked up a few things in the casting, how you work that fluke. It's important. Yep. A lot of my hits when I do use the fluke, it's one of my favorite, is on that drop.
Yeah, the drop is
just before it kind of hits. Before it hits the bottom.
Yeah, they get it.
Come up on it. So on the saltwater side, I use a fluke for particularly a flounder. We're coming up on flounder season. It's currently closed here in Florida. It will open in December 1st. It's from October 15th through November 30th. December 1st, we start fluking. I'll be fluking. Here's one of the ways, one of the rigs that I use, and that it includes a fluke. Now, this could be, I just tied a drop loop there. This could be a three-way swivel. Many guys use a three-way swivel. And you need a weight that's going to stick to the bottom. And when I say stick, it's got to run along the bottom. So whatever weight you think you need to hit bottom, put another ½ ounce on. Because this thing has to hit the bottom and kind of stir the bottom. The flounder is sitting in sandy, mostly sandy bottoms, some mud. And if they see the little ruckus and the sand being picked up, it draws their attention. Now, so I put this usually on a 2 to 3 foot leader. All right. I've got a kale hook, which I find works best for flounder. They've got a very soft mouth. And it works very similar to a circle hook. Right. Just come right out and hook them around the mouth. And I put a fluke at the end. Now, they love the fluke, and they love a pink fluke. The brighter pink, the better. Don't know why. My guess is that it resembles a shrimp, probably. But as you drag this, and for flounder fishing, majority of the time, you will be drifting. So you want this dragging along the bottom. So this is your line. That's the sinker. You got about 2 or 3 foot leader. I use a kale hook, and then this just comes you're drifting. So for flounder fish, you only drift, and this bounces along the bottom, and the flounder will come up. And again, he's going to, typically a flounder's going to do this. He's going to grab it, and most people try setting the hook, and it's done. All you're doing is pulling out the lure from the flounder's mouth. He's going to bite or grab onto it, but gotta wait a second because he's then going to jump on it, and then you set the hook. And it's not a bass hook. It's not a bass hook setting where you wail back. It's a gentle set. It's just
more lift up.
Just lift up. Just lift up, similar to a circle hook.
Okay.
If not, you just rip it right out of their mouth, and then you reel them in. And when you bring them by the boat, a lot of people lose flounders right by the boat. Again, this membrane, the membrane around the mouth of a flounder is really soft, thin. So net them. Gotta use a net. If you do this, a lot of the times, bye, Mr. Flounder, they're gone. So net them head first into the net, whoop, and bring them in.
Okay, so what pound test leader do you prefer to fish with flounder?
So I'll use a 20 to 15 pound fluorocarbon.
Okay.
And that's more than enough. And the only reason I'm doing that is because you might run into some structure, some rocks,
or maybe
and this may
snook
rub it. Or yeah, that's right. Here in Florida, something with teeth, or maybe a snook may come up and grab it and run with it. So just to be safe. Otherwise, I mean, you can get away. Certainly, you can get away with a 10 pound leader.
Okay.
So but it's a very basic setup. The other way is the Carolina rig it.
All right. Okay.
So Carolina rig it. You know, you put your barrels, put a barrel sinker in here. I use beads to protect the knot.
Yeah, okay.
Some people use different color beads. I have done that as an attractant for the flounder. So 3, 4, 5 of them. They kind of create something with color. And again, this is going to come drifting along the bottom of the floor of the bay or the river, wherever you're fishing, the ocean, and it's going to attract that flounder. Now remember, they're going to do this: bite and then jump on it. So
no
feel the bite, wait, 1, 2, 3. You'll feel like that second bite and just pull back.
Okay. Yeah,
nice and
so the
smooth.
flounder says, you guys, some of you might not really know what flounder do. They don't just lay on the bottom a lot of times. They actually burrow in the sand. They'll flutter and it covers them up. They're a definite ambush predator of the, they are the ambush fish out there because of the way they can hide. Now, and they lay basically on their sides. They got 2 eyes on one side of their head. They're brown on one side, white on the bottom. So you can catch them on a topwater plug, but the reason Dave uses this is because the flounder, they don't get up in school like other fish where they're up in the water column. They lay on the bottom as an ambush predator waiting for something like a shrimp or a finger mullet, something to come by near the bottom. I think that's why you're using that weight.
Yep.
Keeps it right on the bottom.
Absolutely. So as Dan said, they camouflage themselves.
Yep.
They kind of bury themselves in the sand. And I've seen some. I've been over crystal clear water, and I've seen them. And all you see is a small patch of flounder, but you can kind of make out the outline.
Right.
And they're laying into the current. Okay. Obviously, they're just sitting there and waiting for something to come across their path. They are very aggressive.
Oh yeah.
So you can also fish a live mullet down here.
Yep.
Mud minnows work as well.
Mud minnows and finger mullet are the 2 main I've heard.
Yep.
Like the Carolina rig, I've heard leaders as short as 6 inches.
Yeah.
It keeps it in there close, but it keeps that finger mullet right on the bottom.
Right on the bottom. Yep. That's where you want to be. Surprisingly enough, I caught a flounder on a topwater in about a foot of water. Yeah. I was surprised. He did come up. So again, they're very aggressive.
Right.
They look really goofy. Don't be fooled. They're aggressive.
They're aggressive and delicious.
And man, they make great table fare. They're just delicious fish. That's most of you know.
Yep.
All right.
Man.
I think that covers it. Well, thanks, Dan.
Yeah, thank you.
If you want to book a trip with Captain Dan, his information's below. If you want to get on the bass,
this guy.
If you want to get on the bass, check him out. If you want to try a kayak trip in the saltwater area here, again, we are based out of Melbourne, Palm Bay, and Sebastian, Florida. popular spot
Yeah.
now. We're about a little over an hour from the Orlando airport, so make it a day of freshwater fishing, bass fishing, come out in the saltwater on a kayak. It's a really, really great experience.
Yeah, and the Sebastian Inlet is actually well known for its flounder fishing.
It is.
We get some really big, what they call doormats.
Doormats.
Big flounder here.
So what's happening is starting now, and through December, November and December, the flounder start coming out of all the backwaters and the estuaries, and they actually go out to the ocean, to the ledges to spawn.
Yep.
And then they come back in. So if you're in the inlet, obviously everything's being
Yeah.
funneled into that inlet. So it is
Bottleneck place for them.
But yeah, so it's a prime spot for flounder fishing. All right,
All right, man.
we're good. Thank you for watching, everyone. Please subscribe to the channel. Keep an eye out for the next video. Until then, goodbye and God bless.
See you guys.